The 2026 Middle East conflict is not a regional war. It is the first domino in a chain of great power confrontations that could drag the entire world into a catastrophic third global war. How the 2026 Middle East war could trigger World War III. Smoke rises from three directions at once. Sirens scream across Tel Aviv, Tehran, and Beirut simultaneously. Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, an American carrier strike group cuts its engines to battle stations. Radar locks everywhere. A missile just crossed a red line that 5 American presidents swore would never be crossed. The world holds its breath. In Moscow, a secure line rings. In Beijing, an emergency Politburo session convenes within the hour. This is not a drill. This is not a proxy conflict. Every major power on Earth just got pulled into the same burning room. The Strait of Hormuz, 21 miles wide, now controls the fate of the global economy and every tank, aircraft, and warship circling it. 17% of the world's oil passes through that bottleneck every single day. Today, nothing moves through it. Markets open in Tokyo, and within 11 minutes, the worst financial crash since 2008 begins cascading across every exchange on Earth. The question every general, every president, every citizen now faces is the one no one prepared to answer honestly. How did the world let it get this far? To understand 2026, you must go back further than most analysts dare. This war did not begin with a missile. It began with a map drawn in 1916. The Sykes-Picot Agreement carved the Middle East into artificial borders that ignored centuries of tribal, religious, and ethnic boundaries already drawn in blood. Britain and France divided a civilization between themselves over a secret lunch, and the region has been hemorrhaging consequences ever since that arrogant afternoon. When Israel declared independence in 1948, 5 Arab armies attacked within hours. The wound opened that day never fully closed beneath the bandages. Every peace deal, every ceasefire, every diplomatic framework since 1948 treated the symptoms while the infection underneath continued to spread silently and lethally. Iran's 1979 Islamic Revolution transformed the region's power architecture overnight. Suddenly, a theocratic state with revolutionary ambitions bordered the world's largest oil reserves. The Iran-Iraq War killed over 1 million people through the 1980s, while the United States quietly armed both sides at different moments of strategic convenience. America's 2003 invasion of Iraq destroyed the one regional counterweight that kept Iranian expansion in check. That single decision reshaped the entire power balance. With Saddam Hussein gone, Iran stretched its influence westward through Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, building what military analysts would later call the Shia Crescent. Hezbollah in Lebanon became Iran's most powerful forward-deployed force. 100,000 rockets pointed at Israeli cities, funded and directed from Tehran. Hamas in Gaza followed a similar pattern. The October 7, 2023 attack on Israel was the deadliest single day for Jewish people since the Holocaust. Israel's military response in Gaza changed the political temperature of the entire world. Protests erupted across every major city from London to Jakarta. The Abraham Accords of 2020 had briefly promised a new architecture for regional peace, normalization between Israel and Arab states that would isolate Iran permanently. Saudi Arabia stood on the edge of joining that framework. A Saudi-Israeli normalization deal would have been the most seismic diplomatic shift in 50 years. Iran watched that possibility approaching and made a strategic calculation. A normalized Middle East threatened everything Tehran had built across 4 decades of patient proxy warfare. The Houthi campaign against Red Sea shipping that began in late 2023 was Iran's opening signal, a demonstration of reach, of willingness, of how far the network extended. American, British, and coalition forces struck Houthi targets in Yemen repeatedly through 2024 and 2025. Each strike hardened Houthi resolve rather than breaking it. By early 2025, Iran crossed another threshold. Its nuclear enrichment program reached weapons-grade levels that Israeli and American intelligence could no longer describe as theoretical. The International Atomic Energy Agency issued its most severe warning in 30 years. Iran was weeks, not months, from a deployable nuclear device, according to multiple intelligence assessments. Israel's government faced the strategic choice it had delayed for 2 decades: strike Iran's nuclear facilities and risk full regional war, or accept a nuclear-armed Iranian state permanently. Prime Minister after Prime Minister had promised the Israeli public that Iran would never be permitted to cross that final threshold. The clock was now at 1 minute to midnight. American diplomatic pressure urged restraint. Back-channel negotiations through Oman attempted to offer Iran economic relief in exchange for a freeze. Tehran rejected every offer made. The final piece fell into place when a high-ranking Iranian general was killed in Damascus in January 2026. Iran blamed Israel immediately, publicly, and with extraordinary fury. Revolutionary Guard commanders told the supreme leader this attack required not a proxy response, but a direct Iranian military strike on Israeli soil for the very first time. February 14, 2026, Valentine's Day. Iran launched over 300 ballistic missiles and drones directly at Israel from Iranian territory in a single coordinated salvo. Israel's Iron Dome, Arrow, and David's Sling systems intercepted the overwhelming majority. But 14 missiles pierced the layered defenses. 31 civilians died in Tel Aviv. The images of burning apartment buildings broadcast instantly to every screen on Earth. The rules of the Middle East changed permanently in that single night. Israel's war cabinet convened for 9 hours. Every option on the table carried catastrophic risk. Every option off the table carried existential risk instead. The Prime Minister addressed the nation at dawn. The phrase used, a response of historic proportions, was not rhetorical flourish. It was an operational warning. Within 72 hours, the Israeli Air Force executed the most ambitious long-range strike campaign in its history. Over 100 aircraft flew east through Jordanian and Saudi airspace. Targets included the Fordow nuclear facility buried deep in Iranian mountains, the Natanz enrichment complex, the Parchin military research site, and 3 Revolutionary Guard command centers. Jordan scrambled fighter jets. Saudi Arabia quietly left its airspace open. The geopolitical signal was unmistakable. Some Arab governments wanted Iran's program destroyed as much as Israel did. Iran's air defenses were partially degraded in the first wave. The second wave struck the port of Bandar Abbas, Iran's critical gateway for Gulf oil exports and arms shipments. Explosions lit the Gulf sky for 4 hours. Satellite images confirmed destruction on a scale not seen since the Gulf War of 1991. But Iran did not collapse. The supreme leader appeared on state television looking calm, composed, and deliberately unhurried. He announced that the Islamic Republic would respond with everything at its disposal. Hezbollah launched its full rocket and missile arsenal within 12 hours. 40,000 projectiles struck Israel over 72 hours, a scale never seen in the conflict's history. Northern Israel became uninhabitable. Haifa, Tiberias, and dozens of smaller communities absorbed barrages that overwhelmed even Israel's extraordinary layered air defense network. Israel mobilized its entire reserve force, 360,000 soldiers, and began a ground incursion into southern Lebanon simultaneously with continued airstrikes against Iran. The United States moved its second carrier strike group, USS Harry S. Truman, into the Gulf of Oman to join the Gerald R. Ford already positioned nearby. American and Iranian naval vessels came within 3 nautical miles of each other in the Strait of Hormuz. Warning shots were fired. Radio communications broke down entirely. On March 3, 2026, an Iranian anti-ship missile struck the USS Bataan, an American amphibious assault ship operating near the strait. 27 American sailors were killed instantly. The Pentagon confirmed the attack within the hour. The President of the United States appeared before cameras pale-faced and visibly shaken. The word used was act of war. Congress did not debate long. Authorization for military force passed within 48 hours with overwhelming bipartisan support, the first such authorization since September 2001. American B-2 stealth bombers, flying from Diego Garcia and Missouri, struck Iranian command infrastructure, air defense networks, and naval assets simultaneously across 12 target sets. Russia immediately convened an emergency UN Security Council session. China's foreign ministry issued its strongest statement in years, warning America against further escalation of the conflict. Both nations vetoed a ceasefire resolution, but neither moved military assets visibly toward the conflict zone, yet. The word "yet" carried enormous weight in every intelligence briefing worldwide. Turkey, a NATO member, refused to allow the alliance to operate from Incirlik Air Base for strikes against Iran. It was the most serious internal NATO fracture in decades. Pakistan, nuclear-armed, with a large Shia minority and deep economic ties to China, began moving military units toward its western border with Iran, publicly describing defensive repositioning. The Houthis fired a ballistic missile that struck a container ship from South Korea in the Red Sea. Seoul summoned Iran's ambassador and suspended all diplomatic relations immediately. Oil prices crossed $300 per barrel. The global economy did not simply slow, it seized. Supply chains built over decades began snapping one by one. March 19, 2026, a date that will be studied in war colleges for the rest of human history. Everything changed in 12 hours. Iranian intelligence had spent weeks preparing a contingency, not another missile barrage, not a proxy attack. Something far more calculated and far more dangerous. 3 coordinated cyber attacks struck simultaneously. Israel's power grid, the U.S. Central Command Communications Network, and the Saudi Aramco oil processing system at Abqaiq. Abqaiq processes 7% of the entire world's daily oil supply. It went dark in 90 seconds. Saudi Arabia declared a national emergency before sunrise. In the same hour, a sleeper cell activated in Bahrain, home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters. A car bomb detonated outside the main gate. 6 Americans died. 31 Bahraini security personnel were wounded. The 5th Fleet base went into full lockdown. Operations across the entire Gulf theater were disrupted immediately. Israel's grid failure lasted 4 hours. 4 hours in which Hezbollah launched its most precise strikes yet, guided missiles targeting military air bases across northern and central Israel. Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion Airport took a direct hit. The international departure terminal was destroyed. Air traffic across the eastern Mediterranean halted entirely for the first time ever. In Washington, the National Security Council convened with every principal present. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs placed America's nuclear forces at DEFCON 3 for the first time since 1973, the Yom Kippur War, the last time the world stood this close to the nuclear edge in the Middle East. History, wearing its familiar disguise, had returned. Russia moved the Moskva-class cruiser Varyag and 2 destroyer escorts into the eastern Mediterranean. They positioned between the American carrier group and the Syrian coastline deliberately. The message was unmistakable. Any further American strikes towards Syria or Lebanon would require passing within weapons range of Russian naval assets. Moscow was drawing its own line. China simultaneously moved 3 naval vessels through the Strait of Malacca, publicly announcing joint exercises with the Iranian Navy in the northern Arabian Sea the following week. This was no longer a regional war. This was the architecture of great power confrontation materializing in real time, visible on every satellite feed and naval tracking system globally. Israel's prime minister picked up a secure line to the White House. What was said in that call has never been officially confirmed. What happened next speaks louder than transcripts. American and Israeli Special Operations Forces conducted a joint raid on the Fordow facility, deep inside Iranian territory, attempting to physically disable what remained of the nuclear program. The raid lasted 40 minutes. 11 American operators and 6 Israeli commandos were killed. The facility was partially destroyed. Iran announced the capture of 2 surviving American soldiers. The capture of American prisoners of war on Iranian soil transformed the political equation entirely. Suddenly, every American family had skin in this conflict personally and viscerally. Protests erupted across American cities, some demanding military escalation to free the soldiers, others demanding immediate withdrawal and negotiation. The country fractured along its deepest lines. Congress fractured too. The coalition that had authorized force began to splinter. Senators who had voted yes began hedging publicly, reading the mood of constituents with midterms approaching. Iran's supreme leader announced the captured soldiers would be tried under Iranian law for espionage and terrorism. The threat was medieval. The fury it generated was volcanic. President after president had sworn no American soldier would rot in an Iranian prison. Now 2 were there, and the options to retrieve them all carried catastrophic escalation risk. China's foreign minister flew to Tehran, not to broker peace, to discuss the terms of an expanded economic relationship, and to signal unmistakably whose side Beijing would choose. Russia's president gave a speech in Moscow that drew direct comparisons between American actions in the Middle East and NATO's eastern expansion along Russia's borders. The framing was deliberate. The message was that American aggression in the Middle East was part of a pattern of encirclement that Russia and China would resist together. For the first time since the Cold War, two nuclear superpowers publicly aligned against American military operations. The Third World War was no longer a metaphor. It had a structure. By April 2026, the world had changed in ways that could not be undone by any ceasefire, any treaty, any diplomatic framework yet invented by human civilization. Oil at $300 per barrel meant food prices doubled across developing nations within weeks. 40 million additional people entered acute hunger according to UN projections. Pakistan moved closer to Iran. Turkey drifted further from NATO. Saudi Arabia opened back-channel talks with Beijing for the first time at the highest level of government. The dollar's status as the global reserve currency faced its most serious challenge in 80 years as China accelerated the international rollout of the digital UN settlement system. Every alliance, every assumption, every architecture of international order built after 1945 began visibly straining under pressures it was never designed to absorb simultaneously. NATO held an emergency summit in Brussels. The communiqué issued afterward used language that experts described as the most alarming official document produced by the alliance in 40 years. Taiwan watched every development with particular attention. Every Chinese military asset repositioned toward the Middle East theater was one fewer asset available for a Taiwan contingency. But Taiwan also noted that American military resources were now stretched across two theaters simultaneously, and stretched resources invite calculations by those waiting for an opening. The lesson of 2026 was not that the Middle East caused World War III. The lesson was that the world's systems for preventing war had rotted quietly from the inside. Every early warning was ignored, every red line retreated, every diplomatic off-ramp was dismissed until the off-ramps ran out entirely and only cliffs remained on every side. History does not repeat, but it rhymes with terrifying precision. And the rhyme scheme of 2026 bore a disturbing resemblance to the summer of 1914. The world of July 1914 also believed its economic interdependence made war irrational. Trade, finance, and communication cables connected nations as never before. None of it stopped anything. Every generation believes it has evolved beyond the catastrophes of its ancestors. Every generation discovers, too late, that it has merely inherited them wearing modern uniforms. The technology changes. The missiles fly faster, the networks crash harder, the financial contagion spreads in milliseconds instead of months. But the human calculations remain identical. Miscalculation, pride, the belief that the other side will blink first, the conviction that your red line is more credible than theirs. These are timeless, lethal illusions. The 2026 crisis did not happen because leaders were uniquely evil or uniquely stupid. It happened because systems built to prevent war were allowed to decay through decades of complacency. Peace is not the natural state of powerful nations competing for dominance over finite resources, strategic geography, and the loyalties of smaller states caught between them. Peace is infrastructure. It requires constant maintenance, enormous investment, difficult compromises, and the political courage to choose negotiation over the easier applause of confrontation.